Buy2wayradios.com. Check, check. Buy2wayradios.com.
It's the Two-Way Radio Show.
And welcome to the Two-Way Radio Show. I'm Rick Savoya.
And I'm Danny Feemster.
And this is the podcast about two-way radios for business and consumer communications. Today we celebrate our 200th episode of the Two-Way Radio Show. We'll talk about the history of the show, how two-way radios have changed since it started, and list our top 10 most popular episodes. We'll also take some of your questions from our email, YouTube channel, and forum at twowayradioforum.com. Our show is sponsored by BuyTwoWayRadios.com, the source of two-way radios and radio accessories for businesses and consumers since 2002. BuyTwoWayRadios.com, your radio specialists. On February 21st, 2011, we released the very first episode of the Two-Way Radio Show. And now, 14 years later, we are celebrating episode 200.
Goodness, it's the time. Where does the time go, Rick? It seems like it hasn't been that long. I mean, 14 years? Is that what you just said?
14 short years.
Goodness. Wow. That's unbelievable to me.
And during that time, we've covered quite a bit of ground. We've really covered a lot of topics. We talked about a lot of different things. And, I do recall something that you said in the very beginning that, a few episodes and we'll run out of topics. And even now, we still haven't run out of things to talk about.
I cannot believe we made it past, say, 30 episodes. I really can't. I thought after 20, we would be out of stuff to say and we would be reaching for topics.
No, but yet here we are.
Somehow we've found something to talk about 200 times.
Yeah. Well, for those who haven't been listening all through the different episodes of the show, who've just recently started, let's talk about a little bit of the history of how we started the show. Now, we did launch the podcast in February 21st, 2011. And Danny, maybe you have a recollection of how it all started. How did we come up with the idea for the show?
I'm going to give you full credit for coming up with the idea for the show. I remember you had probably just when you started working for us, you were like, hey, I've done a podcast before. We really need to be on this podcast thing. And basically at the time, that was 2011. I think everybody was kind of like, well, what's a podcast? We've heard of a podcast, but, what I don't think I was listening to any podcast at that time. And now I pretty much exclusively listen to podcasts. I don't listen to radio anymore. So the podcast world in general has grown incredibly since then. But
yes.
I'm going to give you full credit for deciding to start this and talking me into it. I think I was probably really hesitant at first. And, I don't like doing stuff like this generally, being on webcam or recording. And so this is all you.
Well, I don't know. You were pretty much on board when I pitched it to you initially, and you were, we were always looking for new ways to market the company, to market by two-way radios and promote the products and things like that. And it wasn't too difficult, as I recall, to convince you to do it. I think the issue initially was, okay, how are we going to do it? Really more than anything else, because I think what we did was, now I remember that we did a test podcast in your office with you and Anthony and myself, and we were huddled around your desk to do a full podcast as a test. And we had the mic that we were using, I think we had borrowed your son Jacob's snowball mic and was sitting in the middle of the desk, and the three of us were sort of trying out the podcast for the first time, going through the first episode. Now, we never really released that episode because we were just testing at the time. But then after that, and I sort of put it together. I sort of edited it, cobbled it together to make a show, and then we listened to it. And then at that point, I think is where you were saying, "Hey, let's order some equipment," and we actually got some proper equipment, proper mics, and a recorder and that sort of thing. And then when we started doing it. That's how I recall it. But the first one was very rough, wasn't it?
I probably mentally blocked the first one out. It was probably so bad. So I do remember huddling in my office, but I don't remember any of the specifics of what we talked about or anything like that. I do remember that what really convinced me to do it was that I thought it would be an easier way. At the time, we were doing some YouTube videos, but
Yeah.
getting a YouTube video done was like scripting and then record. It was a longer process. So I kind of thought, well, the podcast will give us an easier way to put out if we get a new product in or something, or there's something we want to talk about. I thought that it would be a little bit easier to throw some content out on it and maybe enhance our product pages a little bit and things like that. So, and that has been the case pretty much, right? I mean, for a long time, we had a product review segment so we could link the podcast episodes where we talked about a specific radio or something over to that podcast episode. And I think that drove some traffic to the podcast. But we've gotten a little more free form here over the last couple of years, I think, with the way we do it.
We have. I initially, it was a little bit more of an actual radio show because in the beginning, a lot of people didn't know what a podcast was, as you said earlier. And it was kind of structured. We structured it to be more familial to people, sounding like a radio show. And that's how we pitched it, for those who didn't know what a podcast was. And that's how it was commonly promoted in general. Podcasts in general were promoted that way, where they say, well, what's a podcast? Well, it's kind of like an internet radio show. And because of that, when I formatted this particular show, for us to record, I formatted it in a way that there were different segments. There was a segment where we had a main topic we discussed, and then we kind of had a kind of commercial break in the middle, with some bumpers, and then we came back and did a product review. And General Anthony did the reviews. And originally it was you, Anthony, and myself doing the show. And that's kind of how we structured it. And then over time, as podcasts became more mainstream and everybody knew kind of what a podcast was and the formats for podcasting were very, very open across the board, you were saying, hey, let's kind of ditch this regimented, commercial radio format and go more free form. And that's what we did. And it's worked out pretty well, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a little better. There were some times where we were struggling a little bit, I think, to find a product to review. If we didn't have something new that month or something, we would be like, all right, well, we got to fill this segment. Let's review this leather case or something like that.
Yeah, we've had a few of those.
Yeah. So this style that we're on now, I think, works pretty well, where we just pick a topic and kind of go, and then maybe throw some questions in at the end that gets us onto, gets us to wedge a few other things in. Mm-hmm. And we also added the video format to the podcast. That wasn't too long ago, but it let us put the podcast on YouTube. And I think that's helped grow it a little bit.
Yeah, we had talked about doing that for a number of years off and on, but I don't think anybody really felt comfortable about being on camera with it like that, doing it live. And because we did do some editing on the podcast. I mean, a lot of podcasts are edited. But over time we were thinking, well, YouTube was becoming more prevalent and more people were watching videos on YouTube. And we were saying, hey, maybe it's time for us to do this. Plus it gave us an opportunity to sort of connect more with our audience, because our audience could hear us and they got to know us by voice, but some of them wanted to actually see us. And so we had actually had requests to say, hey, you should do some videos so we can actually, see who's talking, and it made it a little more personable that way. So,
I think what helps on the
yeah,
YouTube side is like sometimes we chop up the episodes up into like a video that contains a smaller segment where maybe we answer a question at the end and that becomes its own video,
yeah,
or like when we're talking about a new product or something as the main topic, that gets its own video. And I think a lot of times people that aren't regular listeners to the podcast consume it that way, or prefer to
yeah.
consume it that way, because it's more about, oh, I'm interested in this topic and I got a video for that.
Yeah, the short form videos too, like on TikTok and things like that, have helped extend our reach pretty much overall, not just for the podcast, but for the videos, the YouTube channel, the Rumble channel, and the products and our website in general, I think, has done a lot for it. Now, this really came into being when we hired Tommy, because up to that point, we had a lot going on, and video was a little bit of a different animal, and we just didn't necessarily have the resources and the manpower to do it, along with the audio podcast. And then we hired Tommy, and it's like, well, okay, he had strong video production skills. And then with that, we invested in more equipment, and now he does a lot of the video production side of that. And that's helped a lot, I think.
Yeah, for those that don't know, Rick's main job is to keep the website running and up to date, and to make sure products get added to the website and are correct when they go there, and come up with creative descriptions sometimes for products and things like that. So this is kind of a part-time thing for you, not your primary responsibility.
Right.
So doing social media and video and all this stuff was too much. So bringing
Yeah.
Tommy on to take the social media and the video side of it away has definitely allowed us to do more on that side of things.
Mm-hmm. Well, we know how the podcast has evolved over the last 14 years, but what about the products that we've been talking about and the topics we've been talking about? Because we do cover some very interesting topics, not just the products, but a lot of things that are going on in the industry. How has that all changed over the last 14 years?
The topics that we talk about on this show are mainly driven by what we're doing with our e-commerce store, buy2wayradios.com. So it's kind of like the overall industry is somewhat separated from what we're doing here, because we're focusing on the stuff that we're seeing on a day-to-day basis. And we specialize in radios, and we sell radios to various markets, and the markets that we've covered have changed a little bit over the years. For example, I think when we first started doing this podcast, business radios and business radios still are the primary part of our business. This is mainly what we're selling on a day-to-day basis. And when we started the podcast, that's mainly what we talked about, were business radios. Over the years, GMRS has grown quite a bit. Amateur has grown quite a bit. So you'll see, if you look at year by year, the topics we've covered, you'll see like, oh, they must have been growing a lot in the amateur radio world during these years. And GMRS sales must be up during these years. You can kind of see what's going on, or you can kind of figure out what's going on in our business based on the topics that we're talking about. But we've also kind of figured out that people looking for business radios, even though that's mainly what we're doing, aren't really listening to podcasts. So we factor that in when we pick topics. So you see most of our topics are consumer oriented, ham radio or GMRS radio. Occasionally we throw a business radio topic in there if we have something interesting, particularly interesting going on. But I think there's a reason we keep it mainly consumer focused, because people that are listening to this podcast every couple of weeks don't really care about business radio so much.
Yeah.
So what has changed radio wise? I think the move to digital has been the biggest thing. Like I'd say in 2011, very few radios that we were selling were digital, and now a lot of the radios business radios in particular, a lot of what we're selling are digital or have digital capabilities, DMR
Yeah.
or IDAS from ICOM or Kenwood Next Edge. We see a lot of that. Also, you see a lot more digital on the amateur side.
Well, there is another area that we've covered from time to time, and we've covered it pretty much on a general basis throughout the history of the show. But over the last 5 years or so, it's become more and more an integral part of the show. It's come up to the forefront in a lot of the episodes that we do, and that is GMRS. Now, in the beginning, as a matter of fact, I think the very first episode that we did, episode 1, the product review was the GXT 1000. Being a GMRS radio, of course, and Anthony did this review on the GXT 1000. Since then, the GMRS has become really a focus of a lot of the episodes. And it's interesting how that's come to be.
Yeah, I think GMRS in general has seen a big explosion since 2019, 2020, I would say is when it started. And that a lot of that could be specific to us because, we started working with Ocean and we came out with some GMRS products that have become quite popular. So maybe that we see more of that than other places. But when you look at other retailers like Amazon, for example, there's a ton of GMRS radios available now. Yeah. And I think a lot of it is related to the changes the FCC made in 2017. But there's continues to be, at least from what we see, a lot of demand for GMRS products. So, and when we do episodes about GMRS, they seem to get listens. So,
and views on YouTube. I don't see it slowing down anytime soon either. It seems to be just rolling. It's like the snowball effect. It's just getting bigger and bigger all the time. I mean, I hope the trend continues, of course, but it's just interesting how if you go back and look at the early episodes, we talked about it a little bit. We talked about a lot of different radios, and of course, the show has been about not just FRS and GMRS and things like that and business radios, but we've covered topics like marine radios and airband and a lot of CB. We've covered the gamut. We've really run the gamut on those topics, but GMRS is just more and more becoming a huge focus of everything. And I mean, it's kind of amazing to see that happen. Did you imagine that being the case when we first started?
I didn't imagine GMRS being this popular. I mean, we'd always suspected that. Here's the thing: there weren't many radios made type accepted specifically for GMRS prior to, I'm going to say 2019. I mean, when we came out with the Ocean KG805G, that was one of, just a handful of GMRS specific radios on the market. It's just really taken off since then because maybe with FRS being split out in 2017 as its own completely separate thing, people that were looking for a little bit more advanced radio, but still not requiring all the knowledge and the license and all that ham requires. I think GMRS just kind of fit that perfectly. And I didn't expect it to take off like it has, but I'm glad it did. It seems to fill a niche, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, I was going to mention, too, that when we did that first interview on the GXT 1000, what's really amazing is that radio was already around for quite a while before we had actually reviewed it. And here we are 14 years later, and it's still one of the biggest selling GMRS radios around from Midland. I mean, it's still extremely popular. I kind of figured it would have been retired years ago, but nope, it's still
No,
there. People still buy it.
they need to keep it. I don't know. I mean, it's still a great radio.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's. I mean, why would you get rid of a radio that's this popular? There's a ton of reviews online saying it's a good radio. So you've got um, a lot of content out there about it. So getting rid of that model would, a replacement model isn't going to be as popular, I don't believe, because
Yeah.
people that are doing research online just won't find it the way. I mean, any type of GMRS radio search you do, you're probably going to run into older content pushing the GXT 1000 DP4.
Yeah. Well, I'm just kind of amazed because we've seen a lot of other radios come and go, and we've reviewed a lot of them on show. We've made a lot of fanfare about some new radio that has come out on the market, and we would talk about it and make a big deal about it. And then a year or two or a few years later, it's gone. It's been discontinued or whatever. But the GXT 1000 is still right there. It's just plugging along. I find that really, really, really amazing, actually.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about some of the popular episodes, our most popular episodes. Now, when we did, now this is episode 200, but in episode 100, we did a countdown from 10 to 1 of the 10 most popular episodes. And I'm not going to run through them now. You can go back and listen to episode 100 to hear them all again. But I have a few here for reference to compare against the most popular episodes that we have since then. I've compiled a list of the most popular episodes since then, and I think the comparison is going to be pretty interesting. So without further ado, let's go through the most popular episodes since episode 100. And we'll start right here with the 10. We're going to do a top 10 counting from number 10.
All right, hold on. Let me make sure I understand what we're doing here. You in episode 100, we went through a list of our most popular or our top 10 episodes,
right,
of all time. And now you're going to go back through that list and you're going to compare it to the top 10 episodes of all time now.
Yeah, we'll see what's changed.
Okay.
So let's go through the most popular episodes of all time from this point on, and then we'll kind of reference a couple of the ones from episode 100 and see what's changed or what stayed the same. It should be kind of an interesting experiment here. All right, so number 10, we have episode 104. And episode 104 was how much is too much power in a handheld radio, which the 10th most popular episode was that one. And I can see why, because, that's power is a big deal among a lot of radio users, particularly in ham and GMRS. But we were actually in this episode discussing, okay, well, what's the limit on a handheld radio? What this one was about was we were talking about the Lation Note at the time, if you remember, and the Lation Note was a 25 watt handheld.
Yes. And I think our consensus was, I don't know if we want to really use a 25 watt handheld. That might not be safe. I don't know. Might not.
That was the consensus, at the time. Now, we were contemplating carrying the radio because Lation had said, they sent us one for eval and to demo. And like after messing around with it for a while, we said, no, it's just.
I don't want to sell a radio that might, be harmful.
Yeah. But it was interesting. It was an interesting radio, to be sure. Of course, it's a big radio too, big handheld. It was like a brick, about the size of a brick too. So, and by the way, since then, we didn't carry it, but the demo model, I had put it up on the shelf for a while, and then I took it down one day, and the battery on this thing, which was a massive battery, was bulging out, and you couldn't even fit it back on the radio again. So that tells you that, probably made the right decision on that one.
There was a lot of battery in that radio, as I recall. It was a very large battery pack, and it was probably quite old by the time you saw that issue. I imagine.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing from our notes here, we did that episode in 2016. So
yeah, that was June 1st, 2016. So that was a while back. Now the next one here, number nine. Believe it or not, number 9 is episode 100. That was titled "It's All About the Two-Way Radios," and that's where we did the first countdown, 10 most popular episode countdown, and we did some giveaways and things like that on the show. I kind of expected to be, it's a 100 episode commemorative episode, but it turned out that people still download this and listen to it. And that was December 23rd, 2015 is when we published that episode. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah. Okay. I can see it. I mean, episode 100, that's a big, number. If I'm checking out a new podcast and I'm sorting the episode list, I might look for like a big anniversary type episode, just to get an idea of what's going on. What do you think? Maybe that's it?
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah, I guess I would too. Sometimes if I'm just checking out a new podcast for the first time, hit the milestone episodes.
Yeah.
Okay, I can see that. Well, number 8 on the list. Number 8 on the list was episode 106. And this is the one where we asked, is DMR becoming the digital radio standard? And that was that came out in 2016. What are your thoughts on that one?
I can see that topic being something people would be interested in for sure. I mean, it's an older episode, but I can see that that's kind of a general topic. It's something that, like, when we have the current events type episodes, they kind of spike in the beginning and then nobody cares about them, a few months later. But this is an episode that I think has some longevity.
Now, this one I'm not sure about. Number 7 on this list is episode 101. That was the episode right after our 100th episode. And this was called Lation Mobile Backpack Radios. And that's when we started carrying the Lation radios. And they had the backpack version of this radio, which I thought was interesting. I don't know. I'm not sure about that one as far as why everyone continued to listen to that or continues to listen to it today. But we no longer carry it. But I
have my suspicion. If I had to take a guess, I would say that there aren't many backpack radios out there for purchase. So probably, if I would guess that when you search Google for backpack radios, I bet because there's not a lot of competition for that term, maybe our podcast episode shows up in those search results fairly highly. So maybe that episode benefits from search traffic a little bit more than other episodes might.
Yeah. Well, also our videos that we did on these backpack radios are pretty popular still. A lot of people still watch those. So, yeah, I could be right about that. Yeah, number six going down the list is episode 111. And this was the new, at the time, the new TYT MD 2017 dual band DMR digital radio. Are you surprised about that one at all?
No, I'm not surprised by that, because that was a very popular radio for quite a while after its launch. This was a radio that people were anticipating. It was a dual band, super heterodyne, DMR digital amateur radio. And it was I think, a fairly low price when it was introduced. And for a while, it was like the best deal as far as if you wanted a dual band DMR radio for ham, it was the go-to radio. So I bet that this episode got a lot of listens around that time period. I mean, it probably got a ton of listens, and it probably got, this episode probably got like promoted on blogs from ham radio sites and things like that.
I'm pretty sure it did.
Yeah. I'm sure that was our best selling radio of 2017, outside of the business products.
Yeah. Well, it had some interesting features for the time for DMR, as I recall. And it had a very interesting antenna on it too, that it was a little bit different from some of the other antennas that were there.
I don't think there was a dual band DMR radio available before that one. I don't, at least, I don't remember one.
I'm trying to remember. Maybe the MD380, but those were separate. The MD380 was, you had a VHF and a UHF version. I think this was one of the first ones, at least from TYT, that had both. That was a dual band. So yeah, I think you're right about that. But related to that, the fifth most popular episode was episode 102. And that's when we talked about new TYT radios for 2016. That was I think that was when we were talking about some of the MD380s and that sort of thing. So I think we had just started carrying TYT around that time, and or we hadn't been carrying them for very long.
I am sort of noticing a trend. Like the first 5 episodes that we've listed are all in the right around 100 range. I wonder if this could be people subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcast and sort the list by episode name. Mm-hmm. And alphabetically, those TWRS-10 are going to show up at the top of the list. So maybe that's why
could have something to do with it.
Episodes around number 100 are ranking so well.
Perhaps. But then we get to the last 4. And I think that is really the most interesting to me. The 4th most popular episode of all time so far is actually below the 100 episode mark. This is episode 67. And this is when we covered the 2013 Rock Hill Ham Fest. Now, this is interesting because to do the comparison with the most popular episodes in episode 100, this also ranked number 4. So if I'm not mistaken, it was, it was not necessarily number 4, but it was up there. It was on the 10 top episode list. I thought that was really interesting because to me, episodes like that, when you're covering, say, a ham fest or something for a particular year, to me, that would have sort of a limited shelf life. You know what I mean? But this one has been, it still gets a lot of downloads, even now, even today.
I tend to agree with you. I don't know that people, I mean, why would someone listen to a episode about a 12-year-old ham fest? I mean, Rock Hill Ham Fest at that, which is, that's our local ham fest. But in the big scheme of things, it's a pretty small ham fest. I wonder if maybe there could be another explanation for this one too. Maybe the Rock Hill Ham Fest isn't a super popular ham fest. Maybe if you search Google for Rock Hill Ham Fest, maybe our episode shows up high on the search for just something fairly generic like Rock Hill Ham Fest. And every year people are searching Google for that and finding our episode and giving it a listen.
Well, I have a couple of theories on that myself. This particular episode had 2 interesting things in it. And well, first of all, it was our first local the Rock Hill Ham Fest was the first ham fest because we're based in Rock Hill. that was the first time we had ever gone to that one. That was not our first ham fest, but it was the first one that in our town that we'd gone to, and attended and was actually part of. And that's where I interviewed the organizer for the ham fest that year, Ken Tedder, and I did a little interview with him. I think there are a couple of things going on here. I think one, the interview with Ken Tedder was very interesting. I listened to it again today, and I've got a clip here. It's about a 4.5 minute clip. We'll play it at the end of the rundown here. But I thought that when I listened to it again today, I'd kind of forgotten just how interesting that interview was, because he talked about how he got into ham radio, and it was a very interesting story. It was a little different from how I kind of thought it would have gone. But the second thing about this episode that stood out to me was that this is where we did the product. We were still doing the product reviews. We did a product review on a Baofeng radio. I think it was I'm trying to remember which one it was. It was not the UV5R. It was one of the offshoots, but we did one on that one. And I think a lot of people were, that was in the show notes too. So I think a lot of people might have been looking for a review on that. So maybe they listen in to find out what the review on the Baofeng was all about.
I could see that for sure. If it's such a popular Baofeng radio and we've got a review, then the episode would probably get some clicks. It'd probably show up well for people searching for reviews of that radio. So you may be onto something there.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to play this clip. It's about 4.5 minutes. And this is an interview with Ken Tedder of the York County Amateur Radio Society during the 2013 Rock Hill Ham Fest. And we're speaking with Ken Tedder. Ken, welcome to the Two-Way Radio Show.
Well, way back in the dark ages, I got involved in two-way radio, namely amateur radio, because of a little old pasteboard sign on the side of the road in Shelby, North Carolina. There was a sign sitting out there that said Hamfest. I looked at my girlfriend. She looked at me. She said, "What's that?" I said, "I don't know." So we drove and followed the signs till we got way up in Brackett Cedar Park, and we found there was a ham fest. It was the Shelby, North Carolina Ham Fest. That was way back in the late 50s.
Wow, so that was your first exposure to ham radio, was the Shelby Ham Fest in the 50s.
Well, insofar as amateur radio, yes it was. I was always a tinker. I liked to fool with this, fool with that. In fact, I made blinking lights by hooking some wires across one so they didn't quite touch the other, except when the movement of the clock moved, it would make the wires touch. And a byproduct of that, it'd make a light blink. And my mama and granddaddy thought that was amazing.
So you start off, you got your, at that time they weren't doing technician in general, they had different classes for licensing. What was your...
Well, back in those days, you could not be an amateur radio operator unless you learned international Morse code. And that was the dots and the dashes, such as ABC has little dots and dash combinations. And there are differences in international Morse code or the other Morse code, which is used for railroads, and that's where we really butted heads. My daddy was a professional telegrapher with Western Union. Went to the Western Union College down in Rome, Georgia, and some of the letters were different, such as Q, in our case, was da-da-de-da, but that was not the Q that he knew. So he didn't like that. He says, "You got the wrong thing." I said, "No, I hadn't. I got the right thing." We had a little argument. It was fun. But when I first got to Rock Hill, South Carolina, I met a man by the call letters of W4UMW. Old man and his wife had a little hobby shop, and it was on Caldwell Street, downtown Rock Hill. And I got to talking to him, found out he was a ham radio operator. And I said, "A what?" And, "Oh, that's what we saw up in Shelby." And he said, "Yeah, you need to come to our club." So I went to a club meeting and I joined Rock Hill Amateur Radio Club, not the one it is now.
So the original Rock Hill ham radio club, or it was called Rock Hill Amateur Radio Club.
That is correct.
And that was founded. How long ago was that formed?
What year was that?
Yeah.
That was in 1962 that I moved here. Oh. And I'll be honest, I don't remember what year it was. We changed over and became the York County Amateur Radio Association. But that was made because we began to have more and more interaction other than right here in town. And we started reaching out a little further with a repeater. I had the privilege of working with a now deceased individual who was a ham radio operator, but also a commercial operator. His name was Morris Hall, and Morris actually did the two-way radio work for the city of Rock Hill.
Oh, okay.
He fell and broke his wrist one time, and I asked if I could help him. He said, sure. And I worked with him and did some soldering on a few little odds and ends. One thing led to another. He and I took two old radios, one a Motorola 43 GGV, I think it was that, and another one like it, some old things he had in the shop, made a receiver out of one, transmitter out of the other, and I built a little device called a core, a carrier-operated relay. It did nothing but sense the incoming signal on the receiver. That would turn on the transmitter, and we put antennas upside down, one up and one down, trying to separate them. It didn't work. So we put one way down in the woods behind his house, behind the cemetery down off South Cherry Road. Later on, we climbed up a water tank, almost got in trouble, but finally got approval to go ahead and put the antennas on the water tank. Again, one up, one down, but it was not good separation. We ended up later on having to buy a device that separated the signals, and that way we put cans in to take care of the problem.
And that was a part of the interview. The interview went longer than that, but that was just a little piece of the interview with Ken Tedder. And I thought his story about how he got into ham radio was interesting. It was just, he's driving down the road and sees a roadside sign, Hantha, what's that? Goes there, and the rest was history. We lost Ken some years ago. He passed away. I don't remember now. It's been a few years now, but he was a really nice guy. And Tommy and I had interacted with him from time to time, and he'd get on the net sometime at night, the local net. And he's a really knowledgeable guy. He knew his stuff, and his stories were always pretty interesting.
Yeah, he was a super knowledgeable guy. And I know he was very helpful to us when we first started getting into ham radio, probably about that time. I think maybe we started selling some ham radios, and then a year later, maybe we looked into going to the Rock Hill Ham Fest, and that's probably when we started to get to know Ken. And he's so entertaining, such an entertainer. You could hear from that clip how entertaining the guy is. He's a good storyteller.
Well, number 3 is episode 99, the episode just before the 100th episode. And this was the new, at the time, Ocean KG D901 DMR digital radio. And I think that was actually one of the first, was it one of the first? It was one of the first DMR radios we carried. I think that started happening before we were carrying some of the TYT radios. I think, if I recall correctly, that was in 2015. So that was about a year. No, I was some months before we started carrying the TYT radios. The D901, that's one that had come and gone. what are your thoughts?
That was kind of a short-lived radio. I think we had it for a couple of years maybe, but I think it was replaced by the UVN1. Which is a dual band. The 901 is single band. The N1 is dual band, and we stopped carrying the 901 after the N1 became available. So I don't really understand how that could be the number 3 most listened to episode. That doesn't make any sense to me.
It doesn't, but it still is, and we still get downloads on it. So these are ones that are still active. They're all still active, but we still actively get downloads on these. But now we come to the number 2 one, and this would be episode 73. And this one, I can fully understand why. This was titled the Ocean KGUV 899 and Baofeng UV5R Comparison. We were comparing these two radios. I'm sure you have some comments on that one.
Yeah, well, the UV5R is probably the most popular ham radio in the world, actually,
Yeah.
if you just go by number of radios sold. So anything you do talking about a UV5R is going to have the number of views amplified. That's what I've learned. Like we've done a few YouTube videos. We carried the UV5R for several years. And we've done a few YouTube videos related to, and all of them do pretty good numbers compared to our other stuff. So it's just, I think, a matter of how many people are out there that own the radio or that are considering the radio. So they're looking for information, and here you go.
Well, that's also another one that was on our most popular episodes list in episode 100 as well. It was right up there in the top 10, the 899 and the UV5R comparison. So that one's it's been popular through the ages, I guess. Since we've been doing these 100 podcasts. Let's see, and our the number one episode. You want to take a guess?
Well, I would be cheating because I'm looking at your list.
All right. Well, our number one episode is episode 80, the Baofeng Radio Myths and Facts.
Aha! I knew it.
Yeah, episode 80, and I can understand. I can understand why. There's been a lot of discussion about that over the years, and it was also one of the top 10 in episode 100 too. So Baofeng Radio.
I believe it was number one. I'm looking at the top 100.
Yeah.
The top episodes from episode 100. It was number one then, and it's number one now. Maybe we should start selling Baofeng radios again. What do you think?
Maybe so. Maybe it's time to do that. I mean, I'll leave that one up to you, but maybe. We still get a lot of calls from people about the UV5R, and we get a lot of people wanting, wanting support for the UV5R, which we haven't carried it for a number of years. That's, yeah, I don't know. We're set up for it. I don't know if we you're still ready to do free Baofeng UV5R support for everyone.
It is it presents a challenge. I'll say that, to sell the UV5R. I mean, we sell a lot of radios. I mean, it definitely moves the needle, but it's just hard to make money on them. Is the problem. There's so little margin. Yeah. And you end up dealing with a lot of support, and you can't really raise the price too much over what Amazon is selling them for, because then sales dry up and people accuse you of ripping them off, and it's a challenge.
Well, it is a challenge, but they are still the videos that we have on the UV5R are still some of the most popular videos on our channel. We still get lots and lots of views on those. So, I mean, it's still very popular. It's just, I don't know about the support issues on that.
What happens is we would, when we were selling these radios, we were like literally the only place on the internet where you could buy a UV5R that also offered phone support. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people that buy these radios aren't hams, or they aren't really familiar with radio. It's their first radio ever. So what would happen is you'd end up very often with a tech support guy spending hours helping someone program their UV5R or explaining something with the UV5R. And when you're making $3 a radio, it's hard to make that work out.
Yeah, and in fact, the first support call you get for a sale on those, you've already lost money. Really, it's been a
And you can't change your model on offering support and all that, because that's not fair. And I think what people really like about us is that we have tech support, and you can call and talk to a real person that speaks English, that lives in the United States.
yeah.
So after a while, we just decided to stop carrying them altogether. And nothing against the products, really. I mean, for the price that they sell for, they do a lot for a $25 or whatever they are, and probably $20 now. Radio, it's just an amazing value.
Yeah, it is actually. But that's our top 10 most popular episodes since episode 200 as of now, and that's what we've got. What do you think? What's your favorite episode? Send us an email, drop us an email, or hit us up in the forums and in the blog and tell us. Let us know. You can email your comments to show@by2wayradios.com. Tell us what your favorite episode is. Well, we have some comments and questions from email and our YouTube channel and the forum at twowayradioforum.com. And our first one.
Hold on, Rick. I've got the first one.
Okay. Well, you go ahead and give the first one.
I'm throwing a wrench into your plans here, but I talked to one of our sales guys earlier this morning, and he said he's getting bombarded with this question. So I wanted to throw it into this episode so we have something to point customers to.
Okay.
It's going to be short and sweet, and there's not a lot of information. But he says people are calling like crazy, asking how these tariffs are going to impact the prices of the radios that they buy.
Well, that sounds like the topic of a whole episode right there.
Well, it's not going to be the topic for a whole episode, because I don't know. I don't work in the government. It seems like the tariff policy is changing every day. So we don't have a lot of information right now. I can tell people what I'm seeing, and that is, as of right now, tariffs on imports from China have increased 20%. That's on top of tariffs that were up to 25% already, that were from the first Trump administration and then remaining from in the Biden administration. So we're if what they just added holds, we're looking at a up to 45% tariff on some two-way radios. So what I'm hearing is probably some of our suppliers are willing to absorb some of that. We're probably going to end up absorbing some of that. But my expectation is that there will be price increases on some radios. Now, we stocked up on a lot of radios that we import directly from China in January. So hopefully we've got, hopefully we're going to be okay through what I think is going to be the turbulent period over the next couple of months. But if things happen the way they're looking like, I think that we do expect to see some price increases. And every day now I'm getting emails from domestic distributors that we buy from saying to expect price increases. And I've seen emails from domestic manufacturers that we buy direct from that are saying to expect price increases. So I've got no certainty. We haven't really gotten anything from these domestic manufacturers and distributors saying, here is the new price. Prices have gone up. I haven't seen any of that. But I've been told to prepare for it.
Okay.
So
that's good to know.
And maybe we could do a whole episode on this once we know something, once we know a little bit more. As of now, there's not a lot that's definitive.
Well, we have an email from Paul. He's responding to episode 199 when we were talking about the 7 things the FCC should change. And Paul says, as someone new to the hobby, I'm surprised that you guys are in favor of allowing multi-service radios. Knowing the way backroom deals get made with government, I just assumed that this restriction must have been implemented at the request of manufacturers and dealers as a way to help them sell more radios. Great show. And that's from Paul.
Well, Paul may be correct, but we are not big enough to be in the room when those backroom deals are happening.
Yeah, that's true.
So I kind of feel like it would make a better product for consumers to have multi-service radios to be allowed. And the biggest thing is we're trying to do things legally here at Buy Two-Way Radios, but like Amazon is not trying to do things legally. You can already get multi-service radios. There are radios you can buy that are fully unlocked and wide open, and you buy them from a competitor of ours, and you can use them in this way, even though they may not be legal. I feel kind of like if they allowed the multi-use radios to be legal, then we could compete a little better by offering products that had this ability.
Well, to be fair, I don't think Amazon's intentionally trying to do anything illegal. What it is that they're just allowing everybody to come in and sell what they want for the most part. And they really don't know. They really don't know the radio industry or the radio business or the services that well. They really don't know. They're just a platform for selling stuff. And so they really, I think for the most part, they really have no idea what half the stuff is on their site until, the FCC or somebody comes knocking on the door and saying, hey, you can't do this. But see, that's another reason for going to a reputable dealer for your radios, like buy2wayradios.com, rather than just buying them through Amazon, because you're going to get not just the support for those radios that you won't get from Amazon, but you'll also get a little more peace of mind knowing that what you're buying is legal and the FCC might not come knocking on your door at some point. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I do agree with that. I don't think Amazon is intentionally. I think Amazon could never sell another two-way radio on their site, and they probably wouldn't even notice.
Yeah.
It's such a small percentage of their overall revenue and sales. So, they're not doing it on purpose, and they don't even know. You're absolutely right.
Well, we have a YouTube comment on episode 199. We've had a number, actually. I'm going to read this one. This one's from Ray, and Ray says, I believe CB, MERS, and GMRS should all be allowed on the same radio. They're all three radio services that don't require more than a simple license that really shouldn't be needed for GMRS, since FRS also uses those same frequencies. And that's from Ray.
Yeah, that's exactly what my point is. If you can make a radio that supports all of those services and still conforms to the rules of each of those services. Now, I could see you don't want to allow a multi-service radio if it means that like CB is no longer going to conform to what the FCC says a CB radio has to conform to. But if you're transmitting on CB frequencies and it conforms to what the guidelines are for CB, then why not? It just seems like there's no reason to restrict that. It's just harmful to consumers. That's my thought. Does someone please let me know if I'm missing something?
Well, we have a comment here from our forum, and this is from Sean. Sean says, I just finished listening to your latest podcast concerning dreams of FCC changes. I like the idea of radios being able to be used on multiple services. We all know it is being done now and has been done for as long as there have been different services. The age limit has always made no sense to me. If a youngster can get an amateur license, why not a GMRS license? Having some way for businesses to apply for GMRS license for individuals seems reasonable as well. There are already people who have made a business of renewing your amateur license for you. I didn't hear any changes that you guys proposed that would be a real problem. Having said that, even though the present government seems to be trying to bring some common sense to the DC, I don't see the amateur MERS GMRS services being very high on their list of things that the FCC will look into. Thanks for another good podcast, and that's from Sean.
Well, Sean, I agree with every word you said
Right.
there. It's I agree that this is not on anybody in the government's radar, and it's not likely to be on anyone in the government's radar. This is something that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, but in the FCC, they probably have bigger fish to fry, and they aren't going to concern themselves with the kind of things that we suggested. But the ones that we came up with were supposed to be very basic suggestions that everyone would agree with. So it does seem like we haven't got a lot of pushback on those suggestions. Would you agree with that, Rick? All the comments
Yeah,
are fairly positive?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I would agree. All right, well, I guess it does it for our comments and questions for this episode. Send in your comments and questions for Danny or myself to show@bytwowayradios.com. If you want to know more about today's topic or about two-way radios in general, check out our forum discussions at twowayradioforum.com. You can subscribe to the Two-Way Radio Show directly from our website at twowayradioshow.com or hear it almost anywhere you can find a podcast. You can also subscribe by email. Click subscribe by email on the Two-Way Radio Show podcast page at twowayradioshow.com. Enter your email address and you'll get the latest episode of the Two-Way Radio Show as soon as it's released. All right, Danny, I guess that does it for the show in this episode. Before we go, any final comments?
I think we got it.
All right. Well, today's show is sponsored by BuyTwoWayRadios.com. Whether you're searching for two-way radios for general consumer or business use, Buy Two-Way Radios can help you find the best solution for your needs. Enter the promo code SHOW at checkout and save an additional 5% off your order. Give us a call at 1-800-584-1445 or enter our live chat at BuyTwoWayRadios.com. Well, everyone, as always, thanks for listening to our 200th episode of the Two-Way Radio Show podcast. And until next time, for the Two-Way Radio Show, I'm Rick Savoya.
And I'm Danny Feemster.
And we're out.